Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects the food on your plate to the rest of the world. I'm your host, Dana DePrima. When we think about bread, most of us think about flour and water and salt and yeast and maybe a little bit of butter. Maybe we think about a crusty loaf or a flaky croissant or the smell of a neighborhood bakery. But what if bread really is the end or even the middle of a much longer story? Today's guest is Jonathan Bethony, founder of Seylou Bakery in Washington, D.C., where every loaf begins with a relationship. Relationships with grain growers, millers, seed breeders, and the land itself. Jonathan mills his own flour, works almost exclusively with regional farmers growing heritage and regenerative grains, and has built a bakery around the belief that food should nourish far more than our bodies. This conversation goes well beyond baking. Jonathan shares an unlikely journey that begins in the Adirondacks, winds through Senegal, California, and the Bread Lab, and ultimately arrives at a philosophy that sees farming, food, and community as inseparable. We talk about why whole grains matter, what happens when bakers truly partner with farmers, and why connection may be the most important ingredient of all. If you've ever wondered whether the way we produce food can also shape the way we live together, I think you'll find this conversation both surprising and inspiring. Let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Jonathan Bethony.
Sometimes joke around and say the funniest thing to me when I walk in here is that everybody thinks this is a bakery. It's an imaginary bakery. Jokes aside, I say that because the most important part to most of us here is there's something much more meaningful to be found than would most commonly be thought of when thinking of a bakery and, baked goods and delicious bread, delicious croissants, nice coffee, great place to hang out. That's all great. We hope to achieve that kind of an environment and product and experience for people. But what's behind it, what's underneath it, what's driving it is something that I think one can feel in the product and one can feel in the environment, but that is not usually explicitly stated. Something that we really believe in is being in the world in a way that is going to really be of benefit holistically to everyone as much as possible. And that's humans, that's animals, that's plants, that's ourself, that's the stranger, that's our family. It's really kind of root down to an effort on our behalf to really just to try to be a good person. I mean, to come from a spiritual background. So for me, this is all about serving God. If I was to root it all back to it, it's simple. It's easy way. It's serving God. What does that mean? Does that mean like prayers and rituals? It's okay, there's some outward forms of that, sure. But it comes down to what is one's character and how is one with the creation? How is one with the earth? How is one with the people one works with? How is one with one's community, one's family? It's that relationship with the rest of the creation. And so how does that translate into a bakery, and Seylou and whole grain and local farmers and all that? Well, I'd say it's by following that tract, which initially led me to look deeper and look deeper again and look deeper again and look deeper again at every aspect of the baking process. And so, for example, I might think I got something that looks nice, that's appealing, that's beautiful, that's important. How do we make beauty in the world? I have something that tastes good. It's a great experience to have, has a nice texture and taste. Now, what about something that's good for you, that's healthy, that's going to actually help my body to be a healthier and better body? And so, okay, then we get into long fermentation. We're going to get into whole grains. We're going to get into different kind of grains. And then I might ask myself, okay, and following from the clues here of whole grains and different grains, it's going to lead to, wait, where does this stuff even come from? And so my materials. So I'm going to look at where are my materials coming from. And then I'll find, wow, some of these materials are coming from big corporation or coming from a big field in Kansas somewhere. So let's follow down further. And now I'm going to choose, how can I now get my ingredients from something that is going to be beneficial for my community? And now with the farmer, what's going to be beneficial for the earth, for the planet? How are they farming? Do they use chemicals? Are they using Roundup? Are they using crop rotations? Are they practicing a regenerative system? All these questions, it's not necessarily linear. It's more cyclical. These kind of themes kind of keep on circling back around and then deepening that way. But just giving you an idea of the kind of thinking and how that goes from how can we serve? How can we do better? How can we make an impact that's good and lasting in this world? And that leads to one's interpretation of that, I suppose. And our interpretation of that, when it comes to a bakery, has led us to sourcing our grains from farmers who share that same basic philosophy of serving and of benefiting, and have put that at the top of their priority list. And so when I talk to Heinz, you feel it in his and Gabrielle's heart. You can feel that they're in this for love. They're in this because they care. And every action, every step that they're taking is coming from that intention, and is coming from that, rooted desire to do something good with their life. It's hard to talk about these things in that way, but really that's at the root of it. And that's kind of what we keep doubling down on. And the way that expresses through our employees and through the folks that come in here is it's just organic. It's almost like a farm in and of itself, that we're kind of growing these intentions here. What does that look like? So, okay, what does that look like as Seylou? What is Seylou? So Seylou is a bakery that is based on the principles of regenerative agriculture, 100% whole grains, so no refined flours, no refined sugar, things like this. Also, not just grains, but dairy, produce, meat, all falling into that same category of being locally sourced, ethically sourced, so to speak, from regenerative farms or from humane farms if it's from animals. And trying to use as much of the whole food product as we can, trying to work with each farm to use as much of the whole farm as we can, whether it's all plant-based or if it's animal integrated, we'll try to use as much as we can of the whole farm, the whole system, feeling that the more in alignment we are with the whole farm, if we can conform our menu and our eating to that, and that farm also conforms to our menu and our eating, and we kind of come together, and we tend to find that's the best relationship. So the farmer's not just growing what we want him to grow, but we're not also just using whatever the farm has. We're in this relationship together, and we're in this dance together. And so we are in constant communication and interaction with each other. So in a feedback loop, in a shared prosperity loop, in a shared fate, so to speak.
When we only focus on the final loaf, pastry, or meal, it's easy to evaluate it based on taste or appearance, or even convenience alone. But when we begin tracing it back to the grain, to the soil, to the farmer, to the ecosystem, and ultimately to the values that shaped every decision along the way, we start to see that every ingredient carries a story. Regenerative agriculture, local sourcing, and whole foods are not simply operational choices. They're expressions of a worldview that recognizes that our health, the health of our communities, and the health of the land are inseparable. In that sense, the bakery becomes more than a place that sells food. It becomes a meeting place between people, land, and purpose, a living example of what can happen when business is guided not only by what is profitable, but by what is nourishing, reciprocal, and capable of creating lasting connection and benefit for everyone involved. I want to go back a little bit because this kind of philosophy, this kind of way of being doesn't come from nowhere. And you mentioned your faith, and that's one component of it. I would love to hear a little bit more about your faith, but also just about how you grew up and where and who was around.
Yeah, I wasn't really raised with much religion, but I was raised with that love. And that was always embodied in different forms, different people, probably through my whole upbringing. So as I got older, we went explored in these different kind of paths in different ways, and the trials and tribulations of teenage years and all of that inside, always knowing, always feeling, always having a longing for that experience and that love. And I swear, everybody I meet, I've not met a person that doesn't have that longing in them, because everybody knows it. And it only stands to reason that you can only remember something that you've already known. So in our path, the biggest practice we use is called remembrance. So I come from a Sufi tradition, Sufi path. This is the mystical part of Islam that is not on the news, not you're going to find on the news, or this should be, but it's actually very widespread, very common. And this is the path of love. If someone was to say, what's your religion? I would say my religion's love, because that's how I measure which direction I'm going in. We look at our heart and we say, how much love do I have? Not just for myself, but how much love do I have for other people? And then how much love do I have for that person that I really want to judge? That's driving me crazy. That's how you really start to know how much love do I have for my spouse after we got in a big argument or something, or how much love do I have for this guy that keeps doing the thing that I actually do all the time, but he's just doing it and it's driving me nuts. And I just can't stand watching him do it. Am I loving him? Am I judging him? Anyway, this is a journey, and we are on this journey of love.
And is that something that you picked up in your own life, or was it something introduced to you when you were young by your parents? Or
I did grow up in a Christian family, I guess. Really, not as much emphasized, but spiritually, yes, very strong. I grew up always having a great love for Jesus, peace be upon him. And, hearing about the stories of these people that were touched by something beyond and moved to serve their fellow human beings in such a beautiful way, that inspired deeply. One day, I think it's when I started to ask in my heart to say, hey, look, I can't do this alone. I'm not so good at guiding myself. I'm not so good at even knowing myself. I need some help, and I need someone to really take me by the hand. Looking back, this makes more sense. Maybe in the moment, I'm not thinking quite this way. But looking back, I can see that that's the direction I was going in. And when I really started to ask for help, and often that can come through difficulties in life. When I realized brain isn't getting me what I need in my heart anymore. Brain follows the conditioning. Our brain says, you need this, you need that, you need this woman, you need this money, you need this status, you need someone to build up your ego, you need this accolade, you need something, None of that is really anything lasting. The heart was saying, no, I need the real thing. I need the real medicine. And I need someone to show me. When I made that intention, those people came into my life the next day. And that's why I go back to sincerity, not making any claims, but I can say that those prayers and that asking came out of some tough times. Ego had to get broken down pretty hard. A lot of pounding and smashing and thumping around through, and still thumping and smashing and bumping into walls all the time. I've had teachers, and it's not so much about the teacher. It's really the relationship with God. But is it God this completely beyond anything we can possibly fathom? Yes. So how do we make that connection? to here. And this is through the experiences, through the signs, through nature, through the little bird that comes and visits you. It's going to be through the mom that loves you. And man, if it's a teacher that actually comes into your life and tells you something about you that not that I know, but that I don't know about me, and helps me to become the best version of myself and helps me to clean the heart. This is something special. I know you want to talk about bread and baking, but I mean, this is, like I said in the beginning, it's a bakery, but for me, it's not. I don't look at it that way. A little bit. I mean, but when I get myself ready to go to work in the morning and to go in, I don't think about so much about the grain and the bread and this. It's more of like, okay, I'm at your service. What do you need me to do? And we go from there.
Sometimes the answer is a croissant.
Yes. That means they got to bring it back. It needs to be grounded. Yeah, bring back.
Yeah. So tell me where Senegal factors in, because it's played a big role in your life.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years ago, you went there.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Why?
It's the most beautiful question, because why would a vagabond 21-year-old borrow a bunch of money and then later sell their car to use all the money they had to go back? Why would they do that, to cross over oceans, to get into little beat up cabs and to go into the middle of nowhere and go stay in a little village for 40 days? Originally, I went over to play music. I was playing the drums in college, and I had a really good Senegalese teacher named Boubacar Diabate. He also played the kora. He was from the Mandinka people, and he was from a special class over there called the Jelly, or Griot in French, and they're the storytellers. They're the living libraries of the people, and often advisors to kings. They're the ones who will relay messages, tell the histories of families, convey spiritual teachings, but through music. And a huge connection with these people. And, I was more growing up in a more folk music environment, maybe a little bit of rock and roll when I was younger. I got interested in kind of the world's music scene a little bit in college, and that led me there. And I went there to learn more about something about the West African experience, especially the drumming. That really hooked me, and I wanted to get more of that. So I went out there on a school trip, first of all. And then when I was out there, I was there to play drums and dance and hang out on the beach. But I kept on hearing about these stories of the Sufi saint. His name is Amadou Bamba, and they call him Serin Touba there because he's literally the saint of Touba. And Touba is a city where he's buried right now. And I kept on hearing these fantastical stories about this man who basically led the resistance, the peaceful resistance against colonization, where some avenues were taken that were more aggressive and forceful. His direction was beatific in his character and his way of loving these people so much that he was willing to be patient with all their bad character and all their tricks and all their punishments and devious things, that he would be patient with them and he would go with them, and he'd even be in jail and he would manifest these kind of miracles in the jail. He would be seen outside of the jail all of a sudden and things like this. But he became a legendary character that really helped to transform a whole generation and is still very powerful in Senegal. I kept hearing about him, and so I wanted to go visit his city. And so I jumped on a bus. I left my school trip and I jumped on a bus, and, imagine you're the administrator on a school trip and one of the students just disappears for 3 days and nobody knows what happened to him. So I took a couple friends with me too. And we didn't have cell phones then. So we just disappeared. And I went to this city and something hit me there. And then I got back to the United States and I sold my car, and I had a job at Whole Foods. My job was to build their bread wall. I wasn't a baker yet. I wanted to get a job, maybe cooking. I just needed something, right? I was just graduated college. Maybe it was my last year in college, something like that. But the job I could get was in the bakery department. And my job was to build this huge bread wall in the morning. I mean, it was really fun. It was something, it was like a kid playing on the beach, there was about 20 different kinds of bread. And you had to make this landscape. And I think I became kind of known for this really elaborate, kind of a little bit over the top. I think they had to talk to me a few times about it, going a little too crazy on the bread wall. But that was my job. And then I would, slice bread during the day for people, take their order and slice the bread. Now, they also had a pretty good baking program. This was the early Whole Foods days before Amazon. They had a nice bakery. They had good artisan bread that they made in-house. And this was in Boulder, Colorado. And it was a beautiful store. And I found myself kind of helping these guys out a little bit. And I really liked it. It was really fun. And I kept on doing a little bit more, doing a little bit more, doing a little bit more. And next thing I knew, my supervisor called me into the office. And she was like, look, looks like you really like making bread, but we hired you to do customer service. And after about the third or fourth time, she's like, look, this is really becoming a problem. And I said, okay, well, do you have any openings in baking? And they're like, well, maybe down the line, but we hired you for this job and we really want you to do this job correctly first before we move you to another department. And, I can understand that. And I was like, man, I'm just not happy. My life's not going so well. And late at night, I'm like, I just need to go back to Senegal and figure things out. And so I sold my car and I spent all my money buying these plane tickets. And I don't know what happened. Maybe it's because I was sleep deprived or whatever. At 2 a.m, I made a mistake in my tickets. And I booked this 2 or 3 months long ticket. And it was only supposed to be, I think, a couple of weeks. I added on an extra month or two. I just got the dates wrong. I still don't really know what happened. But I couldn't fix it. I got the cheapest non-refundable, and it wasn't like you go online now. I remember I was trying to, just call them, and they're like, sorry, we can't do anything. You either go on the trip or you lose the ticket, or you have to get another ticket back or something. And I'm like, I can't afford that. So I just said, you know what? This Whole Foods thing's not working out. The next time I found myself in the office talking to her, I was like, okay, I think I'm done. And I just went to Senegal. And that's when I got out there. My drum teacher was supposed to come out. He's like, I'll come out. Yeah. And, we'll do drums and we'll do all this stuff. And I'm out there in Dakar and it's 10 days later and I haven't even heard a word from him. And I'm staying with people I don't even know. And he never showed up. He never came. And so I finally got a hold of him. And he's like, yeah, something came up. I can't make it. I'm just like, Boubacar, I'm here for another month and a half. I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, I'm going to send you out to someone that I, really love and trust. He's my spiritual teacher. He won't do you wrong. He'll take good care of you. He's someone that I just have full trust in. So, okay. And they took me out to the middle of nowhere. And I found myself sitting across from this man. At this point, colonial languages were out. There's no French, English, just Mandinka. And I don't know Mandinka. I know a couple words. And we're just staring at each other for what seemed like a really long time, not able to speak to each other. And he's just looking at me. He's chewing on his stick and working it in his teeth. And he's just kind of leaned back, looking at me. And I'm just kind of sitting there looking at him. And I'm thinking to myself, am I going to be here for 40 days? No way. And so someone came, a young boy from Gambia, broken English. He's like, the chief of the village said he wants to meet you. And he offered that you can use his shower, one of 3 showers in the whole village. And I was like, okay. And I used the shower and it was great. Nice little kind of outdoor shower. And no one's looking. And I just that was my chance. I'm like, I got to get out of here. And there's this kind of little wall around the city. And I pack my bag. I throw my bag over the wall and no one's looking. I climb up over the wall and I'm out and put on my back and I start leaving. And I get maybe 100 yards down and I just realize I have no idea where I am. And I'm in the bush and it's taken me hours by bus to get out there. And I was just like, what am I running away from? And something in my heart was like, just go back. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go back.
What is particularly interesting in hindsight is how this journey mirrors many of the same principles that would later come to shape Seylou's philosophy. What begins as a search for music gradually becomes a search for relationship. Relationship with teachers, with place, with tradition, and with ways of living that are rooted in reciprocity rather than extraction. Long before there was a bakery, there was already a growing understanding meaningful work emerges from connection. Connection to the people who came before us, to the communities that sustain us, and to the land that makes life possible. The same curiosity that led someone across an ocean to sit with a teacher in a remote village is not so different from the curiosity that leads a baker to ask where their grain comes from, who grew it, and how it was cultivated. In both cases, the impulse is the same, to move beyond the surface and into relationship. What eventually emerges is the recognition that nourishment, whether through food, teaching, or community, is never created in isolation. It is the product of countless relationships, all the way from the soil beneath our feet to the people gathered around the table.
That was 20 years ago. That same man I saw maybe about 2 months ago as he opened his bakery in Gambia. As baking became evident to me at the whole food stage, I could look, yes, I had the love for it, but it was kind of after that, after Senegal, I needed to find a job. I needed to figure out a way to support my wife. And I used to wash dishes in restaurants, and I had a music degree, and playing in bands didn't pay me anything. So I eventually got baking jobs, and I got fired. It was the only time I ever got fired in my life, was consecutively from 2 bakeries. Yep. And it made me so mad. I was livid about it. And one was like, you're not paying attention. And the other one was like, you work too slow. It gave me this fuel to start baking at home. And so I really started practicing. I'm like, I'm going to show them kind of. But I used to read books and just practice all the time and give bread to my neighbors. And, eventually I got a pretty good job baking as a pastry chef and a baker for a restaurant. And then the opportunity came to go to school and got married. And my sweet wife allowed us to spend all of our wedding money on sending me to school. And I got a scholarship because I was working in the field. So I went to San Francisco Baking Institute. And I had to get a job right out of school. So I got a job at this Korean bakery called Paris Baguette. It's kind of like this huge chain. I don't want to say like Dunkin' Donuts, but they're really great people. They really wanted to build an artisan bread program. They're very respectful. They gave me an opportunity out of school. So I worked with them. But it's not like if you look at where I'm at now, I mean, this is like dough conditioners, white flour, imported from Korea, all kind of crazy stuff. And then from there, I got many jobs in the Bay Area, California. I worked at a health food store called The Good Earth. And there they challenged me. They're like a bunch of old hippies. They're like, our clientele, they want whole grain bread. And I'm like, you can't make whole grain bread. I'm like, I just went to school. I'm like, you can't make whole grain breads. Ugh, you really want me to make that? But they challenged me. And, there was some good bakers that I had gone to school with. One's name is Grayson Gill. He opened up Bellegarde Bakery in New Orleans. He's a fantastic baker. But he was there and he was already ahead of me on these kind of things. But I was in a tough place in life. I wasn't, working as a baker. You're making like, what was it? 10, 11, 12, 13, $14 an hour, working really hard. And I had 3 jobs. I still couldn't pay my bills. I hit rock bottom. Wasn't taking good care of myself. Again, it was one of those rock bottom places and calling out for help. And I had never known my dad. That was some of the pain from childhood, that I didn't have my dad with me. He came back into my life in my late 20s. And he came with one piece of advice that really helped me at this point in my life. He said, what do you really want to do with your life? You need to find what your purpose is. And I said, I'm not sure. I think I want to help people. And he's like, you need to be more specific than that. Well, I remembered back to my time in Senegal. I was sitting underneath a tree, and along the path, I'd walked with this young boy, the interpreter from Gambia, Mohammed Camara. I'd walked with him, and he was the nephew of the sheikh that I was sitting there with the stick. And I'd picked up this little bird off the side of the road. And I had a copy of the Holy Quran with me too. And I was walking with a bird in this book, this holy book, and this boy. And we all ended up under a tree. And I had him put his hand on the book, and I had the bird with me. And I said, Muhammad, I said, promise me that you will never tell me a lie. I think I was, when you go to some places, people will, anyway, maybe I was a little paranoid, but I said, promise me you'll never tell me a lie. And he said, I promise. And I said, Muhammad, I swear to you that I will help you one day. I don't know how, but I swear to you that I will help you. And then at that point, the little bird flew away. And I remembered that. And I hadn't done anything since I'd gotten back from Senegal in regards to that. Maybe 10 years had gone by. I'm in California. Now I'm a baker. I'm married. I'm trying to make my life. But I had forgotten about this. Maybe not forgotten, but when my dad asked me that question, that's the thing that came up in my heart. I'm like, man, I promised this kid that I'd help his family, and I really haven't done anything. I better start with that. So I started making effort in that. And as soon as I started making effort in that, man, my world opened up. I sent the money I had left in the bank, which is not much. My wife's like, what? But she was cool with it. I mean, she's amazing. She understood. I started researching agriculture in Senegal, millet, sorghum, black-eyed peas, things like this. Next thing I knew, even in my baking career, things started to open up. I realized that I was living next to Craig Ponsford, who was this famous whole grain. He was like one of the only whole grain bakers in the whole, maybe the world, but at least in the country. He's one of the originals. He was doing laminated 100% whole grain pastries, whole grain bread. He was right there. I was living practically next to him. And I found my way into his bakery. He took a liking to me. He took me under his wing, and he showed me how to do this. He sent me to some great bakers, Mike Zakowski, Dave Mill, bakers that were really, Eduardo Morel, all these bakers that were doing working with farmers and working with whole grains and a lot of what I do now comes from this seminal time. And my world opened. Not only that, I got a job at the Bread Lab. This world famous chef, Dan Barber, went on a nationwide search for a baker from this kid working in the Korean Paris baguette. It was just unfathomable, from the guy that was just washing dishes a couple of years ago. I was nobody, but I got this kind of world famous position as the baker in the Bread Lab. And now all these bakers from around the world are coming to visit me and learn about what Dr. Jones is really about, what he's doing, but also what we were doing together. Dr. Jones is breeding, but I was making the products out of the different varietals of wheat. And whole grains came to the forefront. Farmers came to the forefront. And that's when the real farming end started. That's when I started to become exposed to farmers, and my whole world started to change. And I'm so grateful for Dr. Jones, the Bread Lab, all of that, Dan Barber, that whole experience.
There is an irony woven through this story. The opportunities that follow, the mentors, the bakery, the Bread Lab, the relationships with farmers, appear to arrive after a promise made years earlier is finally taken seriously. Not because the universe is rewarding good behavior, but because honoring that promise fundamentally changes how one orients toward the world. Once a person begins to see life through the lens of responsibility rather than acquisition, different things become visible. Relationships become more important than transactions. Stewardship becomes more important than ownership. The question shifts from what can I get to what am I here to care for? A farmer who cares for the soil is not extracting from it, but investing in its future fertility. And a baker who partners with such a farmer is there to serve the community. This journey suggests that a meaningful life may be less about pursuing success than about cultivating relationships, commitments, and responsibilities that become more abundant over time. The grain, the farmers, the bakery, and the people it serves all seem to emerge from that same underlying principle. It's a very interesting timeline. Now, where were you born?
From the Adirondacks, yeah.
Okay, and then from there you were in Boulder and San Francisco, you're in DC, you were at the bread lab.
All over the place. DC was after the bread lab. Why did I come to DC? To know my dad. That's where he is. I was like, look, it's a little late in life, but let's get started. And so I came out here really to establish the relationship with him.
Let's come back to the bakery. We've now transported through all of this time travel of your life. We're back in this bakery. You were mentioning you have a list of the farmers that you work with in the front. And obviously, it's not a marketing list. This is your practice.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what those relationships are like and how they work for you and what's happened.
Yeah. So just a couple days ago, we were down at Grapewood Farms, and Fred Sachs, David Sachs, his son David Sachs, and I'm trying to remember Fred's lovely wife, her name, the Sachs family. They have an amazing property down a little south of Fredericksburg, Virginia. And they invited us to the farm. And then we brought our whole team down there to learn about where the ingredients they're working with come from. And David's an incredible teacher. And he really took an entire day to explain how they select, how they work with the local university, seed breeding, how they plant, how they do crop rotations, the challenges they face, the mistakes they've made, the successes, touring us through the fields, even letting us drive the combine and the tractors. It was an incredible day. And I think the staff came away transformed. They're never going to look at grains that come in a bag the same way. They're going to have a story. They're going to see the faces. They're going to remember those experiences. They're going to remember it in the field. Some of our front of the house was there. When they go to describe some of the products they're selling, they're going to have a connection to it that is so deep. Because not only the grain farmers will visit, say, Earth and Eats, a kind of a collective of different farmers up in Pennsylvania who do all kinds of berries and vegetables and produce and milk and all kinds of great stuff. So you take a Danish, you're going to see the grains here, the raspberries here, the vanilla cream here. And all of those components have a face and an experience and a history that the person behind the counter is connected to in a real way and can transmit that connection.
You're baking and producing products for your consumers that are full of love and flavor, but you're also milling. That's unusual, Is it not?
Yeah, so I started milling for the factor of freshness. I wanted to have the freshest, whole grain flour is like fresh produce. It's got all the oils. I mean, these are living seeds that are, as soon as you mill them, they're no longer something that can germinate, but it's got that living energy in it. It's like a fresh meat or fresh vegetable that's just been made into juice or something, or like aromatically, it's like fresh ground coffee. So I wanted to have that factor. Also, when baking exclusively with whole grains, the texture of the flour is very specific for different products. So I needed to be in control of that.
You're working with grains that people don't really know about on the mass market.
So moving beyond wheat and rye, kind of the basics, the mentorship of Heinz and Gabrielle has been immense. And this is tied directly into the Senegal experience, by the way, because I found out they're growing a lot of the same things. Heinz was one of the first people I met out here on recommendation of Sam Fromartz, who wrote In Search of the Perfect Loaf. He came to visit me in Blue Hill. I was helping them to develop their bread program and met him. He's like, DC really needs a place that you're talking about, come down here. I'm like, my dad lives there. Maybe I'll think about a business. Anyway, it all worked out. But he's like, you got to meet this guy. This great farmer. He's just incredible. His name's Heinz, and he's growing these delicious grains. So I meet Heinz. He looks kind of like me. It was like love at first sight. I don't know if he'd say that, but for me it was. Part of his character is he gives me a hard time, and I see it as tough love. So, he took me out to his farm and he shows me this amazing system of this integrated, holistic, symbiotic system of growing legumes and cover crops, alternative grains, millet, sorghum, buckwheat, and beans, like all this, some different kind of wheats and rye, straw, this huge tall rye. And it was just, if you look at his wheat fields, it's so biodiverse, full of all different, it's not just wheat. Amazing. Flowers everywhere, bugs everywhere, life. And he takes me on this fantastic tour. And then at the end of it, I'm like, so Heinz, how much wheat can you sell me? And he just looked into the distance like, I don't know what he was thinking. Man, this guy's really thick, I don't know. I just showed him this whole system and he just doesn't get it. He tried the subtle approach, but he just said, Jonathan, like, to be able to grow what you're asking for, it's a component in a system. Why don't you go back and build your menu out of the whole system rather than just a piece of it? I go back, I talk to my pastry chef at the time, we're prototyping everything. He had just come from going from white flour to whole wheat. He already thinks I'm crazy with that. I'm like, Sharbo, no more wheat. Let's go. Let's do everything like millet, sorghum, and buckwheat, and barley, and oats, and all this stuff. And he's just like, oh my God, this guy's completely nuts. So we started making millet cannelés and millet chocolate chip cookies and sorghum brownies and buckwheat muffins that are just buckwheat and buckwheat shortbread. God, we started making this kind of array of unintentionally gluten-free products. People came in like, what is this stuff? I'm looking just for a cookie. I'm looking for just a muffin. Why is it got to be a buckwheat muffin with rhubarb or something? So, because that's what's in season, So working with him and through his mentorship really helped me to better appreciate working with a organic, local, with the natural system and the natural rhythms of the system. And we're far from perfect or of having dialed that really in, but it's through constant going back and forth with him. It's like my teacher, my sheikh, he tells me, this is a journey of coming and going. You go to the sheikh, the heart cleans out, you get refreshed, you go back into the world, take on all the difficulties, have to go back, get cleaned out again. I feel like going to Heinz, I'll take what he teaches me from the farmer, really from any farmer, but they're like the sheikh or they're like the guru in this department. These are people so connected to the earth, so connected to the elements, to the weather, oh my God, they're connected to God. And you go to them and the whole perspective changes. And that's why I'm always trying to send our staff there to go see. And there's no going back. You can't just buy from a flour company after this. You can't just buy regular vegetables after this. Once you know, there's no going back. Each time I go there, I learn something. I get readjusted, recorrected. I'll come back into the city. I'll see the financial strain. I'll see the customer demands for more mainstream things. I'll say, I don't want to just work with millet, or this wheat that doesn't work very well. I want to just buy what works, what's easy. I want to do what's easy, I'll kind of go down that path again.
On the farm front, obviously Heinz, Gabrielle, they're growing certain things and he had some initial demands for you. Is there a push and a pull? Are you going to him and saying, like, I really need this to behave differently? I need a new grade.
Yeah, we'll have those open conversations. I'll say, Alice, this is the only one I really want to buy from you. He will say, you need to tell me this 2 years ahead of time because it takes 2 years of planning for me to get you what you want if it works out with the weather and the harvest and everything. So I'm always telling him kind of what I would like, but I'm way off schedule. For me, a baker will months, days, weeks, whatever. We kind of think more in this. Farmers thinking about in terms of years planning. So I will give him that. And over time, we build these understandings. He also has other customers besides us. So he's going to balance out his inventory and what he's growing with everybody. But that relationship with us, I will say, this is what I like. This is what I want. Sometimes he will say, this is what I have. And I'll say, well, part of our goal is to empty your inventory. So we'll take this. I don't always tell him this, actually. But sometimes we will just buy things just to buy it off him. And we'll figure out a way to use it.
That's part of the relationship.
It's part of the relationship. We'll both do that for each other. That's what I think makes it a special relationship and different.
Now, on the customer front, I'm just curious about this push and pull there as well, because customers have a palate that they grew up with. I mean, I have found in my adult life that I'm like, why am I buying this? And it's something I had as a kid. So it's sort of, there it is. And I'm just wondering, in order for your customers to come along with buckwheat and sorghum and spelt and all of that, they have to develop a palate for it.
Yeah. One of our goals is to make it as delicious as possible. Thankfully, we have an extremely talented team. I can't take credit for it. I mean, maybe I have a little bit of say, and I mean, really, I try to cut people as loose with as much creative freedom as possible here, because they put their love into it. Once they understand the mission to make the best product possible out of the local, whole, diverse set of ingredients we have. Once they kind of get the fundamentals of that, I love to see them just grow and experiment and come up with new things. And if something's not good, sometimes it makes it out there, but we usually keep that to ourselves. And then the customers are really only going to see the things that we've all decided is good enough to put out. So we are kind of advertising our sourcing model through the product. And to best sell the idea, it's got to taste really good and look attractive. And there's a lot of attention that goes into that, a lot of intention and attention.
So what's coming down the road for you? What's your vision for the future?
I don't know. My goal these days is to get as much into the present as I can, and that will naturally lead to what's next. I'm still not quite here. I'm still making a lot of mistakes, still trying to figure out how to do this. So my focus has really been, to the frustration of people that have wanted to partner with me, that even currently want to do something, want to grow, want to open up new locations, want to do all this stuff. What's wrong with Jonathan? He doesn't really seem to want to do any of that. I'll say, yeah, this is great. Oh yeah, it'd be good. But then, maybe I'm too absorbed in my own journey. The way I'm looking at it is look, this is the life I have. I don't know when it will end. I just want to make sure I do the most good I can in it. If that is by growing a business or something, that'll happen. I don't want to lose myself in that, though. And what I keep on waking up in the morning and seeing is the challenges in front of me. And I want to be able to give my whole self to that. I want to give my whole self to the employee that comes to me and is having a hard time with another employee. I want to be able to give my whole self to my children that are wanting to spend the time with me. So I'm finding it hard at this point, to expand, so to speak. The latest, greatest thing I'm into now is making ice cream. That's been fun. We just did some tests today on using the local milk and local cream and local honey to make this kind of ice cream. We did a strawberry one with the local. We have so many strawberries. Last year, there was no strawberries. This year, it is just mountains of strawberries. So everything is strawberry. So we're working on some strawberry ice cream that came out pretty nice today. So just finding those little things like that, going to the farm with the sacks,
Tell me, why Seylou?
So it goes back to that promise in Senegal, Senegambia, say. I used to watch the birds a lot. I love birds. I still have an affinity for birds. And I would watch these huge, massive eagles soar in the sky. And one day when watching those eagles, I think it was shortly after I'd promised this young boy that I would help him, I felt in my heart man, these villagers have given me so much. Because it was in this village, if we can say, when did you become an official Muslim guy? this would be in this village. This is when the elder held my hand and the whole village came together. And I've been spiritually interested in, I mean, I used to go to, church services, Jewish Sabbath services, Hindu Shivaratri, kirtan singing things, Buddhist meditation. I mean, I switched my major from music to religious studies. A general spiritual guy, okay, to wait, this is the path for me. And it was not the path I was expecting. Like, Islam, aren't those the scary guys? Like, wait, all religions are cool, but that was the kind of reaction, I think, across, maybe even still. I mean, these days things are a lot different. This was in 2000, early 2000s. So for understandable reasons, there was a lot of fear around that and propaganda and all kinds of stuff. But that's where I was like, okay, well, this is what spoke to my heart. Everything that keeps coming to me is this. And I'm here and I'm going to say yes to it. And so that's where that happened. And my heart just opened up in this really special way to where I just wanted to serve people. I just made this switch from myself. And once that switch was made, my life started to change. And I was looking at these birds, and it just came into my heart so strong that, like, hey, look at these people. Man, I have more in my closet than a whole extended family is going to have possession-wise. These people have given their heart to me. They've taken care of me. These are such happy people, big smile. What is going on with these people? They've taught me some of that. They've taught me where that happiness is from the heart. They've taught me about God, how to remember God and how to be connected to God. And I don't need anything. I'm just like, I felt set free. And in that moment, I felt in my heart, well, now you need to give, now give. And in that moment, I made a commitment to try to take steps towards that. And even small steps. And I told my friend Mohammed about that. And I said, what's the name of this bird? I was really looking. I felt this bird was talking to me. There, they believe in all this stuff. Magic is real there. I love it. Here, it's like, the bird really spoke to you, huh? What were you smoking, But the bird spoke to me and told me this, and he said, well, what's the name of that bird? He said, the name of the bird is Seylou Kuno in our language. That's what we call that kind of bird. Seylou Kuno. I'm like, Seylou. Okay. And I still remember the day I left the village. The Grand Sheikh, he called me up. It was before dawn. We used to always get up in the morning before the sun came up. The whole village would get together. We'd pray. He would give a talk, some kind of spiritual talk. He'd pray for everyone. Then his wife would give a spiritual talk and she'd pray for everyone. And then we'd all just go on our way for the day. But this time it was to send me off, to leave the village. And I still remember that day. He gave me some final advice. And he said, now go before the sun comes up. And a car came up, drove into the village to pick me up. And I got in the car, and the entire village lined up side by side on both sides of the car along the whole road leading out of the village to the main road. I mean, who does that? What kind of people is this?
What makes this story significant is not simply that a bakery was eventually named after a bird. Rather, it reveals the values that became embedded within Seylou long before that first loaf was baked. The name emerges from a moment of gratitude, humility, and a growing awareness of interconnectedness, a recognition that life is sustained through relationships, generosity, and service. In many ways, the bird becomes a symbol of that realization. The bakery that would one day carry its name was never simply about making bread. It was shaped by a desire to honor the people, places, and teachings that made its existence possible. Seen this way, Seylou is not just a business name, but a reminder that nourishment begins with gratitude and flows outward through the relationships that connect us to one another and to the wider world.
As we started to drive off and the sun came up, I noticed every time I looked up, I saw these birds flying all the way to the airport. And I said, man, I got to remember Seylou. So I made it my email address. And then I started playing a little band later on. Maybe named the band Seylou. My album Seylou. I don't know what I was doing. Well, fast forward, I'm on the phone with Stephen Jones talking about going to the bread lab after all this opened up. And he kept saying on the phone, I just see these eagles flying around in Washington State. He's like, yeah, when you come up here, you'll see there's a lot of eagles here. Like, he's like, yeah. He's like, on the phone when he offered me the job, basically, he's like, oh, I just saw a big eagle fly by. And when it came time to open the bakery, my wife was like, you should name it Seylou so that you remember where you came from and what this is all about. And I'm like, no one's going to understand that name or know what it means, but as long as we do, I guess that's okay. So we name it Seylou.
Beautiful.
And, the year we opened, the USDA contacted me and was like, we heard about your experience in Senegal and baking. Well, we have a millet program we want you to come be an advisor to. So a month before I opened my bakery, I was in Senegal again after 10 years or something. This was 10 years ago. And that started this whole trajectory with working with the National Federation of Senegalese Bakers and then, judging being involved in that baking scene. And I went back to the village. I connected with the village again after 10 years. And I saw the elderly sheikh there, and he was over like 100 years old. I got to see him again before he passed. And then his children, who I still have a relationship with, and we were just over there recently. They started baking. Now they have a little bakery.
Curious about that. If that was one of the ways that you gave back was to really help them with their bakery.
Yeah, I don't like to advertise it to it, but there's that feeling of wanting to make good on that. And I think that heavily propelled me because, I'd never been exposed to that much human suffering until I had gone over there to see poverty. What happens when you can't go to the doctor or you can't afford to go to the doctor? I watched Morkaba was the man with the stick, he lost some of his children. He had to bury some of his children. So he couldn't take them to the doctor. It's something else because he called me and his children are screaming. He's like, we don't have any food to eat. There's nothing to eat. The floodwaters come and they wash out his house and they're sleeping outside. This kind of reality. It's just like, oh my God. It just reminds me of like that connection when we actually connect with each other. We connect with the weakest among us. Weak. They're actually the strongest. If they can go through all that and still be smiling at the end of the day, they're much stronger than I am. But when we remove the barriers and build those connections, like it changes who we are. Same with the farmers, knowing where the food comes from. Seeing a farmer lose his whole crop, or a farmer have his barn burned down. It's just like, wait a minute, and we're all in this together. We all have to help each other. And we can say we love each other, but one of the best ways we can love each other is to serve each other.
Jonathan Bethony reminds us that food is never just food. A loaf of bread can certainly be delicious, but it can also tell a story of a farmer, a seed, healthy soil, a milling process, a bakery team, and a community that chooses to value relationships over transactions. Every decision along the way leaves its mark on what ultimately ends up on our table. One of the ideas that stayed with me most is Jonathan's instinct to keep asking one more question. Where did this grain come from? Who grew it? How was it grown? What kind of partnership made this possible? That kind of curiosity is exactly what this podcast is about, because every time we pull back another layer, we discover that our food system isn't made up of isolated pieces. Farmers, chefs, bakers, researchers, and eaters are all connected. When one part of that system becomes stronger, healthier, and more thoughtful, we all benefit. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who loves food and baking, or simply enjoys hearing the stories behind the things we often take for granted. If you haven't already, I'd be grateful for you to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more people like you discover these conversations. Thanks as always to Sonia Dillon for skillful co-production and to Russell Chapa for making everything sound good with engineering and original music. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and this is one bite is everything, because every little bite you take means more than you think and connects to places and ideas that you didn't expect. Thanks for listening. I will see you here again next week. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.